Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Ahl Bayt Live Fatimiyya special, where we are looking at the merits of Lady Fatima, peace be upon her, and also the events that took place after the death of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family. And in fact, I was just having a conversation with someone today from a different school of thought who, again, didn't completely understand the significance of these events and what this Fatimiyya season or period is about. So inshallah, over the next few weeks, we will be clarifying what this period of time is about that we are remembering, and why we are remembering particular events associated with this time as well. So last time, or last program on Saturday, we were looking at her status in the Holy Quran and a Hadith. And inshallah tonight we will be looking at how the land of Fadak came into her possession. My guest is Brother Sajjad Jiyad, and do feel free to call in with any questions or comments. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for giving us your time.
Thank you for having me on, inshallah. We'll do our best to give the topic its full due.
Inshallah, I hope so. Could I begin with a point that from the previous program? A caller called in regarding the hadith that you read about the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family, saying that whoever angers Fatima angers me, and whoever angers me angers Allah. And someone called in to say, well, this is to do with the fact that Imam Ali alayhi salam was said to have proposed to the daughter of Abu Jahl, and so Fatima was upset, and so the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family, said these words, in response to the fact that Imam Ali allegedly made this proposal. And you were going to find some sources with regard to demonstrating its fabrication.
Yes, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Our scholars have replied in depth on this, and I'll give shortly a link that people can refer to go through the detailed arguments. I don't want to take up all of our time at this juncture, but essentially the issue with that hadith is of twofold. First of all, in terms of its narration, so who the narrators are, and it tends to be mostly a person called Masur, who some of the scholars of al-Amma themselves counted him as either being Khariji, or that he was a fabricator. He was weak. He's a fabricator of hadith. So, and also in the hadith itself being mursal. So at one point, one person claims to have heard it from somebody else, or brings the hadith from somebody else without actually saying how, without having an intermediary. So for me to say I heard it from someone else, but not directly, who the intermediary was, nobody was. So that's called a mursal hadith.
Right.
And there's many other such issues with the hadith in terms of its narration. In addition, we want to look at it from a Sharia point of view and a rational point of view. The Prophet here is here to encourage his sunnah. He's here to encourage the Sharia. So he says to people, get married and take care of your affairs and your families. So he says that marriage is my sunnah. When Amir al-Mu'mineen wants to act upon this sunnah, if this hadith is true, he then tells him, actually, no, you can't carry this out anymore. So it kind of goes against the Sharia. So it makes no sense that the Prophet would tell someone not to do something that is mustahab. So in terms of rational point of view or Sharia point of view, there is an issue with this hadith. On top of all of this, we find that there are efforts, because these hadith are meant to let's say, justify the fact that Fatima was angry. So we can definitely say that she was angry with the first and second Khalifa, but also that she was angry with the Imam. This hadith doesn't take away from the fact that Fatima was angry with the first and second Khalifa, and which is the point that we're trying to make here. So some of our ulama have gone at length to explain that, as I mentioned in the previous episode, that the hadith sometimes are meant to be degraded in some way. Adding something or subtracting to some of them, or bringing a new context, for example, or taking them out of context, to try to take away from the effect of these ahadith. So I refer to the viewers, inshallah, if they want to follow this up. Of course, most of the sources are in Arabic. I apologize that the situation is that only the books on the biography of the life of Fatima actually address these narrations in English. Apart from that, they tend to be in Arabic. And the caller had called in, he was quite specific in terms of the narration and the detail. So I would refer him to a website called aqaid.com, aqaed.com. pbuh.com/FAQ/940. And there must be over 20 pages detailing the faults that I mentioned in the narration, and the hadith itself, the narrators, and also in terms of the Sharia point of view that the Prophet would prevent someone from doing something that is mustahab.
Okay, thank you. Could you just remind me the name of the person, the person who narrated it?
Masur.
Masur. Okay.
Yes, he's one of the narrators, and he tends to be in the majority of the narrations.
Okay.
He claims to have heard it from Ibn Zubayr, Abdullah ibn Zubayr.
Right.
He claims to have narrated or heard this narration from Imam Ali ibn Husayn Zain al-Abidin, which makes no sense because he was in a position to praise the Imam, and then he says that your great-grandfather Ali ibn Abi Talib disrespected your grandmother. So, like I said, anybody who goes into detail will find that clearly this is a fabrication.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, we've got a caller on the line, which we will take now. Assalamu alaikum.
Hello, walaikum salam.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
No, I want to ask just a question about the hadith about Fatima alayhi salam being angry.
Yeah.
And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, anyone who makes Fatima angry makes me angry as well.
Yeah.
I just because I wanted to know, angry is from the shaitan, yeah? Being angry, it comes from the shaitan.
Okay.
And I thought, excuse me, yeah, I thought Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you know, he doesn't get angry because that comes from the shaitan. So does it mean whoever makes Fatima sad or makes me sad? Is it like that maybe?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, I mean, it has been said that anger is from the shaitan. So how could this hadith about whoever angers Fatima and the fact that Lady Fatima, salam alayha, died angry, there are certain accounts of how she even showed her anger, turning her face away, you know, from the Khulafa when they came to see her. So, yes, I mean, again, from sort of the point of view of an argument, how could she be angry if anger is meant to be satanic, let's say?
Anger for the sake of one's own benefit or based on one's individual emotions, we can say are susceptible to being influences of the shaitan, or depending on our level of taqwa. Anger for the sake of Allah is a different issue totally. And when Fatima Zahra is saying that she's angry with the Khulafa or angry with the Muslims for their actions, she's saying that this is because Allah would not be approving of what is happening here. What is going on is an oppression, not against specifically Fatima, or not just Fatima herself, but actually what is being done here is injustice to all the Muslims.
Yeah.
A ruler is acting in an oppressive manner. Hadith is being falsified. What it does not belong to a certain person is being taken away. And all of these are crimes in respects to Allah's Sharia. So when Fatima says that I'm angry, it's not based purely on her own emotions and position. Rather, she's angry for the sake of Allah. We see, for example, in the event of Mubahala, to illustrate this, when the Christians continued in their arguments after the Prophet answered each one of their questions, because the Christians came to question the Prophet on certain things. And one of the questions was, who was the father of Jesus? And after many questions were asked, they were trying to put the Prophet in a difficult situation where he would not be able to answer. They said to him, who's the father of Jesus? And the Prophet was informed by Jibreel that Allah says to them, say to them, the father of Isa is like the father of Adam.
Yeah.
And so the Prophet responded in this manner, and the Christians all looked at each other and astounded that this answer was so direct and so clear.
Yeah.
And even though they reached a situation of being convinced that the Prophet had been given knowledge, divine knowledge, they still wanted to argue for the sake of argument. And so the Prophet became angry with them. Not became angry on a personal level, became angry for the sake of Allah. And he said to them, right, this is now, you're going too far. If you're not going to take part in this debate for knowledge, you want to do it just for delaying or just to waste your time and to ignore the truth, then we're going to have to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this approach here is now the Prophet reacting not in an emotional way, but acting in a way that saying that Allah is not happy, not approving what is going on. We have to move on to another means. And showing dissatisfaction or anger or sadness does this. And we have this in the sunnah of the Imams or the Ahlul Bayt. We have not just their words, but their actions. So when someone came to the Imam, if he was wearing a certain, let's say, clothes of some sort, and the Imam turned his face away, this dissatisfaction, this sadness or this anger is to be recorded, so that the Imam turned away. That means what this person was wearing wasn't the right type of clothes for the time, for example, or it was he spent too much money on it, or maybe it was silk or something like that. And for us to learn from that. And also because his displeasure is Allah's displeasure. He's showing that Allah is not happy with this. So to say that the anger of Fatima Zahra is based on her emotions and it's from the shaitan, clearly that's not the issue here. The issue is Fatima trying to show the displeasure in a human form that Allah would have against these actions.
Thank you. And anyway, as a note, when you look in the hadith collections, you can see many companions being angry as well. And sometimes not angry for the sake of Allah, because the Holy Prophet has to stop them and try to, prevent, hold them back from excessive, some kind of excessive reaction. So we can see different instances of anger, but that's yeah, as you say, it's not an anger that is out of a personal emotion. It's more because she could see the bigger picture of what is.
And Amir al-Mu'mineen explains this in the Battle of Khandaq, when Amr bin Wood comes out to fight with Amir al-Mu'mineen, and finally he manages to defeat him. The Imam comes to to finally defeat Amr bin Wood. Amr spits in the Imam's face.
Oh yeah.
And the Imam walks away, and then comes back to kill Amr. And when he was asked, why did you turn away? He said, because when he spat in my face, I got angry for myself. As a form of defense, when somebody does something like that to you, you get angry for yourself. He said, so I realized that killing him would have an element of me doing it for my satisfaction. So I walked away, but I came back. So to say that here that he came back, and I did it on behalf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah.
So here the Imam justifies having anger for the sake of Allah and angry for your own self and reasons.
Okay, thank you. So going to the land of Fadak.
Yes.
First of all, what was this land, and how did the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him and his family, come about it, and how did it arrive in the possession of Fatima?
Yes, the historical narrative is that Fadak came into the hands of the Prophet after Khaybar. So the Battle of Khaybar took place in the year 7 Hijri, which was against the Jews in Arabia. And after the battle, after the Muslims were victorious, the neighboring villages and landowners began to come and speak with the Prophet, realizing that military confrontation was going to end in their defeat, that they needed to agree a framework with the Prophet of how they were going to integrate society rather than completely rejecting him as they were. And Khaybar was the fortress of all the Jews in Arabia. So once that fell, they realized that military conflict wasn't going to lead to anywhere. And one of the neighboring villages or villages that were near to Medina was Fadak, and the historians say that it was at a short distance from Medina. It wasn't much journey from Medina. And they people that were in that area decided to come and speak with the Prophet, and as a mark of goodwill or gesture or as a mark of agreement with the Prophet, they gave a portion of their land in this area called Fadak to the Prophet himself. And the Quran mentions this verse that talks about the lands that were given to the Prophet but that the Muslims did not have a share in, nor did they help in seizing.
Right.
And the Quran says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Ma afa Allah ala rasulihi minhum fama awjaftum alayhi min khaylin wala rikab walakin Allah yusallatu rusuluhu ala man yasha wallahu ala kulli shay'in qadir. This is Surah Al-Hashr, verse 6. So anybody interested in the tafsir can look it up, whether it's the tafsir from the School of Al-Bayt or the other schools. We'll see that this verse says that whatever lands or whatever bounties that came into the hands of the Prophet, and it was not trodden on by horses nor taken by any soldiers or men, this was purely Allah giving control of it over to you, and it's referring to the Prophet here, and Allah is in control of everything. So we see that Fadak wasn't one of those possessions or bounties that came into the hands of the Muslims generally, nor was it something that they won in war, nor was it something that was taken by force from anybody or something that was agreed in a truce for all the Muslims. This was something given to the Prophet himself. And so in response to this event, when the Prophet was given this let's say possession or land, Allah revealed a verse immediately after this event, informing him that he must give the Jew of the near kin of the family, because then the family of the Prophet was suffering. The Muslims would go out and the Prophet would give whatever bounties were left to the Muslims, and he would take very little for himself, and he had to support his family as well.
Yeah.
And we would likewise see that the behavior of Amir al-Mu'minin matches the Holy Prophet. So that whatever the Prophet did, he would do. So what was happening was the Muslims were gradually becoming wealthier or in better possessions, and especially those that took part in the battles. And we see somebody like Amir al-Mu'minin, who was usually at the front of the battle, leading the battle, carried the standard for the Prophet, who was the hero of the Muslims. His family wasn't gaining anything from this. And so the Quran wants to address this injustice in a way, or this imbalance, by telling the Prophet, and this is in Surah 17 verse 26, and give to the nekin of his due. So give to your family, give to the Ahl al-Bayt what is due to them. And so the Prophet turned to Fatima Zahra, the narrations say, and offered her the land of Fadak. And he said, this is for you to do as you wish with it. The narrations say that Fatima was using Fadak and gaining from its income during the lifetime of the Prophet. And I have here that it was between the income from this lands, because it was mainly land for agriculture. It was between 70,000 dinars, which are gold dinars, gold coins, not the silver dirhams, and 120,000 gold dinars. The income varied per year, which is a huge sum. It's a large sum of money. And the narrations say that Fatima Zahra would have her representative report back to her every while, and he would distribute the income to Fatima, and she would then take a small share for the upkeep of her family, maintenance of her family, and the rest would be distributed to the poor Muslims.
Right.
So it was not used for political reasons, it was not used to buy weapons or armor, it wasn't used to fund Amir al-Mu'minin in a politically significant way. It was purely distributed to the poor, in the majority of it, for the poor people who lived in Medina or thereabouts. And so when we come later on to see the reason for confiscating Fadak, it couldn't have been based on the fact that Fatima was using it against the Khulafa, because its outgoings were mainly for the support of the poor people.
And of course, another point is the difference between a gift and inheritance, because part of the argument for confiscating it from her was this alleged, a hadith where the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family is meant to have said that, the prophets don't leave inheritance. But in this case, it wasn't inheritance, because it wasn't something that he had left in a will for her. It was something that he had given to her before he passed away.
Exactly right. And part of this is that the first Khalifa makes an error here in saying that Fatima should not have Fadak in her possession because the prophets do not leave inheritance.
Yeah.
The point is that Fatima was using this land during the lifetime of the Prophet. So seizing it was as if she just began to use it after the death of the Prophet.
Yeah.
And this is the point, the issue, that Fatima says, this land was given to me during the lifetime of the Prophet. I was using it. Now, on also another scale, for the first Khalifa to say that the Sharia prevents prophets from inheriting, Fatima then responds on that point. Not to say that she gained Fadak through inheritance purely, but she goes back and says, well, actually on this point you're wrong as well. First of all, it's not inheritance that I gained Fadak through. Second of all, actually the point about inheritance is wrong too. If you want to consider Fadak inheritance, I can inherit from the Prophet, as all the prophets do. And we'll come to the arguments, inshallah, in the khutbah of Fatima Zahra. I can mention for the viewers the narrations regarding that Fadak was in the hands of Fatima during the lifetime of the Prophet. So Shawahid al-Tanzil, volume 1, page 441, Ad-Durr al-Manthur, volume 2, page 151, Kanz al-Ummal, volume 2, page 158, Ruh al-Ma'ani, page 5, volume 5, page 58, Kashf al-Ghumma, volume 1, page 476. We can go to Sawa'iq al-Muhraqa as well. I can have the narrations from the books of Ahl al-Bayt, which are Bihar al-Anwar, the 21st volume, page 22, page 23, page 25, the 29th volume, page 105, 110, 114, 115, 118, 121, 123, 195, 348, Tahdib al-Ahkam, for Shaykh Tusi, Juz' 1, the first volume, page 424, Al-Khara'ij, which is volume 1, page 113, Mu'jam al-Bildan, volume 4, page 238, gives details about Fadak in terms of its location, its size, when the Muslims became aware of this land called Fadak. So that's the geographical details in Mu'jam al-Buldan, volume 4, page 238.
Okay, thank you. We've just got a few minutes till we go to break. Somebody has said that it was a gift that the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him and his family, made as a recompense for the sacrifices of Lady Khadija, salam alayha. Is that also part of the reason?
Ahsantum, exactly right. In the tafsir that we have of the verse 26 in Surah 17, is that part of the reason why Allah ordered the Prophet to give the Ahlul Bayt, and specifically Fatima Zahra, their due, was that the wealth of Khadija had all been sacrificed for the sake of Islam in the early part. So in Mecca, the Muslims suffered greatly, and the Prophet used to alleviate some of their suffering with the wealth of Khadija. And he later on narrates, sometimes when someone brings the name of Khadija, he begins to cry. He says, may Allah have mercy on Khadija. She was with me when everybody else was against me. She said that I was truthful and everyone said I was a liar. She gave me all her wealth and died on that when she used to sleep on sheepskin on the floor, basically. So all this wealth that she had, she gave it all away in the sake of Allah and died in a very poor state financially. And so part of the reasoning, yes, some of our ulama have said, is that Allah wants to compensate Fatima on behalf of her mother for the amount of sacrifice she had given to Islam.
Okay, thank you. And inshallah, we will be looking at the reasons why it was confiscated. But I mean, and again, another point to be raised is that with this discussion about again who constitutes the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, because we can see that if the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him and his family, doesn't leave inheritance to the Ahlul Bayt, well, the same people who say he doesn't leave it to the Ahlul Bayt are the people who say that the wives were part of the Ahlul Bayt, and yet we can see that the wives did inherit. Exactly. They kept their homes, they had a stipend, which was kind of raised or lowered according to whichever caliph was in power. And so again, we can see that, well, either, I mean, you can't kind of have it in both ways. That if the wives of the Ahlul Bayt, they also inherit, but Lady Fatima's Ahlul Bayt doesn't inherit.
This is an issue, and I always point to the fact that the wives of the Prophet continue to benefit from the possessions that they had and the wealth and the homes that they had used in the lifetime of the Prophet. And if these obviously belong to the Prophet. So in terms of inheritance, they shouldn't have gone on, if the first Khalifa is correct in what he said, the Prophets don't leave behind inheritance, they shouldn't have been used by the wives exclusively. They should have been given to the Khalifa to distribute amongst the Muslims, as he did with Fadak, or at least to redistribute part of its income. But we see, for example, in the funeral of Imam al-Hasan, Imam Hassan Mushtaba, that the wife of the Prophet, Aisha al-Mu'mineen, she prevented the burial of Imam al-Hasan in the mosque of the Prophet, next to the Prophet, because she said that this is my house and I choose who gets buried in my house. Where the historical record shows that never at one time did the Prophet or did the wife of the Prophet have any document to prove that she owned this house or she purchased this house, but rather we know that this was the house of the Prophet himself. So the Prophet owned this house. So how is it then that the wife of the Prophet came into possession of it? If she didn't buy it from him, if it wasn't gifted to her, then how did she automatically continue benefiting from it and saying that this is my house? Surely the first Khalifa should have taken that and distributed amongst the Muslims, as he did with Fadak. So yeah, we see an element of double standards.
Thank you very much, and we're about to go to break. Inshallah, we'll see you again in a few minutes. Assalamu alaikum. At her speech, inshallah, going into that in detail. And after that, inshallah, if you could just again clarify for our viewers.
Yes, so next episode we'll look at the speech of Fatima Zahra. Thereafter, the episode will look at the effects of the speech of Fatima Zahra. Then we'll have 2 episodes discussing in detail, inshallah, if time allows us, the evidence regarding the death of Fatima Zahra, the attack on the Fatima Zahra's house, and the death of Fatima Zahra.
That's great. Thank you very much. And thank you for your calls. Inshallah, we'll see you in the next program. Assalamu alaikum. Fatimiyya special, where we are looking at the events that took place after the passing away of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family, with regard to what happened to Lady Fatima, salam alayha. And we are looking at the issue of Fadak, the piece of land that was given to her by the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family, which was confiscated by the first caliph after he passed away. So we've just discussed what this land was and why the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family gave it to her, and how she used that land, distributing most of it to the Muslims, keeping a little bit back for herself and her family. Now the issue is, okay, so the first Caliph Abu Bakr, he took it, but the question is why? You know, I mean, apart from, okay, well, he might have wanted to utilize obviously the wealth that was coming from it, but it seems to have been part of a kind of larger policy he had in kind of asserting his position as the first caliph.
Yes, we have the fact also to support the argument that the first Khalifa wanted to restrict the income of the Ahl Bayt, in the fact that he took away the khums portion of income to the Muslims from the Ahl Bayt.
Right.
So we have the verse in the Quran in Surah 8, verse 41, that tells the Prophet, and what you have taken, what you gain out in battle, or what income you generate for the Muslims, you give a fifth of it to your near kin. And the ulama of tafsir, we can look at, for example, Tafsir Kashaf, volume 2, page 221, which is not from the school of al-Bayt, of course, the tafsir by Zamakhshari, explains that this was the ruling regarding khums, that 20%, a fifth of it, Allah has ordained to be given to the Ahl-Bayt. And the sources then, again, we quote from sources that are not from the school of al-Bayt. So Sahih al-Bukhari, volume 3, page 36, Sahih Muslim, volume 2, page 72. They narrate that that Fatima Zahra, after a short while from when the first Khalifa's government was settled, let's say, she'd asked that they give her the due from the khums, which is not an insignificant sum. And it was specifically from the khums of Khaybar as well, because that was when the Prophet began the practice of openly showing where the khums comes from and is distributed to. And he refused, the first Khalifa refused to pay this to her. And the sources say that this was one of the reasons why she became angry with the first Khalifa, that even the khums, which was a Shari'i ruling, a Shari'i practice, was prohibited from being given to the Ahl Bayt, and specifically to Fatima Zahra. So that, with the confiscation of Fadak, shows that there is an agenda against Fatima Zahra. Now, if we want to look at some of the motives, if we wanted to be kind to the first Khalifa, we would say that obviously he was maybe thinking that he should be in charge of distributing wealth to the Muslims. So where Fatima was taking the income from Fadak and then she was distributing it, where he could do a better job. So that's a possible motive, if we wanted to be kind. A second issue is that he perhaps wanted to distribute a salary or an income to Fatima himself from the government funds, and then give this land to others, and so he would still give Fatima Zahra her share, but from a different source of income. That's possibly a motive. A third thing is, which is not being kind to the Khalifa, which is probably saying it in realistic terms, politically, was that not only reducing the income of Fatima Zahra and Amir al-Mu'mineen, but also showing essentially who's boss. So the fact that the first Khalifa could say, I can do as I will and nobody will stand against me, sends a clear message out to Ali ibn Abi Talib, and also to anybody else who's thinking of competing with the first Khalifa in terms of political leadership, in terms of the Khilafah itself. It's saying, look, this is Fatima Zahra, this is the daughter of the Prophet, and yet I can still do what I wish, and nobody is going to stand in my way. So this is assertiveness. This is a way of laying down a marker. So also in terms of later on, when anybody wants to say, I want so and so. He said, well, I refused Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet, then I can refuse you as well. If I manage to turn down their arguments and their pleas, then I can turn down anybody. This was the family of the Prophet, and he was able to do as he wanted. So surely that nobody else is going to stand in his way.
There are also some, according to the sources, saying that once he took Fadak, he also evicted her agents as well. As you said, she had agents who would report back to her, so he evicted her agents. And he confiscated the property that the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him and his family, had given her in Medina as well. So it wasn't just Fadak, it was also other properties that the Holy Prophet had given her in Medina as well.
Exactly right. So when we focus on Fadak, it isn't solely that, but in terms of the arguments she made, she based it on Fadak itself, because it was the largest estate that was seized. And the reference for this is Sawaq al-Muhraqa, page 25. So if the viewers, and these are most of the sources I'm relating here are not from the school of Ahlul Bayt. So this is what the Muslims in general refer to. Sawaq al-Muhraqa, page 25, details the fact that after about 10 days after the death of the Prophet, when the government of the first Khalifa was now a bit more settled, the representative or the agent, as you said, of Fatima, who controlled these estates and lands, were kicked out, essentially. And Fatima received news. She was informed that the first Khalifa has done so and so. And this begins the period of, let's say, argument between the first Khalifa and Fatima Zahra, supported by Amir in establishing who belongs to what.
Yeah. Thank you. So when she did go to protest, there was this famous hadith that was narrated to her, which is kind of strange that she hadn't heard it herself. With regard to the policy as well, there are some historians who say that it was part of the policy, as you've said, of showing who's boss, but also part of the policy of establishing the pattern of caliphate, which was different from the pattern of imamate. So in order to establish the pattern of caliphate, to justify caliphate, the status of Ahlul Bayt had to be reduced somehow, but in a careful way. So it wasn't just reduced in the sense of, right, we're going to just, completely cast them aside, because people will notice that. But what we are going to do is say that we are following, the Sunnah of the Holy Prophet, but at the same time, we're just going to reduce their leeway, and their status and their ability, obviously, to serve the Muslims. Because if you don't have the resources, you can't serve the Muslims in the same way. So it was kind of part of that policy as well. Another thing it says that he did was, although the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him and his family, had strictly forbidden the family to accept sadaqah or alms because of their status of purity, the first caliph said that, okay, if they couldn't have khums, they could accept sadaqah. So that was changed as well. Is that correct?
The changes in terms of practice are numerous.
Right.
And the issue is that the first Khalifa backed everything that he did by saying, well, number one, either the Muslims in general didn't consent, and number two, the fact is that they have agreed with me being me leader, so all my actions are agreed upon by the Muslims, so ruling by consensus in a way.
Yeah.
And by whatever I do, it doesn't matter what was done before. The fact is the Muslims here and now, whoever's alive now, whoever's here now, agrees and doesn't speak out or agrees in what I do, has agreed for me to be their leader, has given me their bay'ah, means that I'm free to do what I want. I'm a ruler of this time. The Prophet did something else. Later on, someone does something different. For me, for now, I have justification. I have a legal, green light to do as I wish. And part of that is what you mentioned, that the Ahlul Bayt formed an obstacle, that the Imam isn't a political leader, he's not elected by people, there's no consensus, no vote taking place. He's not made an Imam because people vote him into, he's an Imam whether people follow or not, whether people are aware or not, whether people agree or not. So that issue needed to be tackled, and this issue of Fadak is one way of dealing with that. But the terms of practice and sadaqah being substituted for khums and khums being abrogated, these add up to numerous times. If we wanted to look at the seerah of the first Khalifa and later on the seerah of the second Khalifa as well, we see that numerous things were not really on the sunnah of the Prophet. And which is why Amir al-Mu'mineen, when he's offered the Khilafah after, or as the second Khalifa is dying, is offered the Khilafah according to the sunnah of the Prophet and the first and second Khalifa. He says, no, if you offer it to me on the sunnah of the Prophet, I will do it. I will accept it. But with the sunnah of the first and the second Khalifa, I won't accept, because he means to say that the sunnah of the first and second Khalifa differs with the sunnah of the Prophet. And so we can't focus specifically on the issue of the sadaqah, because that is insignificant to the amount of things that were changed in terms of Sharia and practice and Sunnah.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So then we come to this narration, which is alleged to have been said, and this is recorded in Tabari, Volume 1, where Abu Bakr quoted the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family, saying, "We, the prophets, do not have heirs. Whatever we leave is alms, and that the Ali Muhammad can eat from that, from the alms." But the key point is, yeah, we do not have heirs. So this is really when these differences started to arise, and these events, sort of unfolded.
Exactly, and the issue with this hadith is that the first Khalifa claims to have witnesses to him, his daughter Aisha, the daughter of the first Khalifa Hafsa, and the historians say in Arabi, who is one of the Arabs that live outside the cities, the less cultured Arabs, let's say. His name is Malik ibn Aus ibn al-Hathan, right. Who wasn't known to be a well-known companion of the Prophet or narrator of hadith. So the only let's say the only person to really have heard the hadith outside the two wives of the Prophet are the first Khalifa. And we question and we say, well, the Prophet had a large family. He takes them out on mubahala with him. He gives khums to them. He knocks on their door for 6 months and says, إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيَذْهَبَ عَنْكُمْ رِجْسَ أَهْلِ الْبَيْتِ وَيُطَهِّرَكُمْ تَطْهِيرًا. He builds a house for Ali and Fatima next to him. He closes all the people's doors leading to the mosque except the door of Ali and Fatima. He says, Fatima is a part of me. He says, Ali is like me, as Harun was to Musa. And so on and so on. So clearly gives a lot of attention to his family. And his family is not a single person. It's Ali and Fatima and Hassan and Husayn and Zainab and Kuthum and the rest of the Banu Hashim. Yeah. Right? So nephews and cousins and nieces and so on and so forth. When we have a look at this, we say, well, if it was so significant, so important that the Prophet don't leave behind an inheritance, shouldn't the Prophet have mentioned this hadith to more people, left it behind in one of his wills, in the speech, the farewell speech, mentioned it so that many of the companions would have known, mentioned it to each one of the Ahlul Bayt, so that they would know. Plus, would this hadith have been said and Fatima would not be aware of it, or Ali ibn Abi Talib would not be aware? We can't say they lie, because clearly the Quran says that they are free from sin. So we say they weren't aware. Is it possible that somebody who's not going to either gain or not gain anything from this hadith hears about it, but the people who are affected by the hadith, Fatima and Ali, don't hear the hadith? So clearly the situation with the hadith is a difficult one. It's difficult to accept this hadith. So when we look at the sources, I mean, if we look at, for example, Kitab Sulaym, Volume 2, page 694, or Bihar, Volume 29, page 134, 156, and 190, they go into detail about the issues with this hadith. And later on, the Imams saying, well, this hadith cannot be true because we cannot find it amongst the prophetic sayings anywhere. None of us have come across this, and refuting this hadith. So it begins with this hadith. The defense of the Khalifa begins with this hadith. But every time Fatima Zahra, and we'll go through it now, as Fatima approaches the first Khalifa and then is refused the first and second, she brings more and more evidence. So the Khalifa's position changes from relying on this hadith to then saying that I have the consent of the Muslims. So the hadith itself isn't purely the only defense the Khalifa uses, which means to show that he doesn't rely on the hadith himself. Right,
okay, that's a good point. Also, as a side point, he did grant his daughter some lands. It says in the Aliyah quarters of Medina and Bahrain. That's in Ibn Sa'ad's Tabaqat. So although again we see Lady Fatima having her properties confiscated, we do see other people being given lands as well.
And later on, Fadak is given by the third Khalifa to his cousin Marwan ibn al-Hakam.
Yeah.
It's given to him. So if this was belonging to the Muslims, how was it given to one person?
Yeah.
If this was inheritance from the Prophet, Marwan is not related to the Prophet, how does it come to? If it's something that's supposed to be for the better use of the Muslims, then clearly his misuse is being made. So later on, with the history of Fadak, we see that the Khulafa themselves didn't behave in the way that allegedly they were supposed to have been used. And also with regards to lands and gifts, if the daughter of the Prophet approaches you, out of etiquette, courtesy, respect to the Prophet, let's say you're going to ignore her request, wouldn't you give it to her as a gift? So right, okay, this legally doesn't belong to you, I'm going to give it to you.
Yeah.
I'm going to give it to you out of generosity, out of respect to the Prophet.
Yeah.
You wouldn't say, actually, I'm going to give you a share of it. I'm going to give you some part of it. You're at least one of the Muslims, so at least a part of it should be for you, let alone that the daughter of the Prophet. But we see that the Khalifa does not behave in this way at all, which adds to the feeling that there was an agenda behind this.
Thank you. So, how did she respond? She said that Fadak was not a bequest of her father. It wasn't inheritance. It was a gift, and she claimed that Fadak was the private property of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family, and it was his. And as his private property, he had given it to her. And it also says in the sources that although the first caliph questioned the status of Fadak,
yes,
he himself had attempted to take Khaybar and had actually seen what had happened. I mean, he'd seen the events, he'd seen how the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family had given Fadak to her. So he'd actually been present. It's not like he was absent and then came along later and said, said what he said. He had actually seen the practice of the Holy Prophet, the Sunnah of the Holy Prophet, but then later on changed that.
Yes, and we see that Fatima Zahra is very careful to point out that it's not a personal vendetta, it's not an issue of Fatima's property. Clearly somebody's changing the Sunnah, and rules are being broken and practices are being instigated that later generations say, well, he did it, so surely that. So it's not an issue of Fatima's personal status, it's much more beyond that. Fatima uses her personal status to say that, look, I'm not an ordinary person. I can't lie, I don't lie. I'm not a female who is easily offended and upset and subject to emotion. I am the daughter of the Prophet. The Prophet spent all his energies in raising me. If I'm going to come and stand and argue with you, you better believe there's a good reason for it. And don't take me at face value as being just an ordinary Muslim. So it's not her own status that she's really conflicted about or upset with the first Khalifa about. Really, it's that what's being done is changing the practice of the Prophet, and she wants to stand against this.
Thank you very much. And we've got a caller on the line now, which we will take. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Yes, I would like to make a very quick comment on the question of Fadak. There are two things to it. The first thing is that it's very surprising that the daughter of the Prophet was unaware of the hadith that nobody inherits from Prophet. Whatever they leave, they belong to the Ummah. So that's very surprising, and that the Prophet left no instructions to her regarding Fadak. The second thing is, I would like to quote from Ibn al-Hadith. A question was put to him that was that Fatima Siddiqa, and he said yes. So the next question was that if he was Siddiqa, why did not Abu Bakr accept her claim to Fadak? And the reply was very interesting, that if Abu Bakr had accepted Fatima Siddiqa and given her Fadak, what if Fatima turned around and said, well, you have no right to Khilafah? That is the right of my husband. Where would he have stood then? So it was very necessary to refuse Fadak to Fatima. This was part of the overall political conspiracy, if you might like to put it that way, to deny her Fadak so that Ali could be denied the right to Khilafah. Okay. That is all I would like to say.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for calling in and your contribution. We've just got a couple of minutes. I mean, some people might not be able to, again, make the link between, well, we've got 5 minutes, between the link between Fadak and also the fact that Imam Ali alayhi salam had been designated as the successor. So, I mean, when you read the historical sources, you see at this period of time a kind of, you know, there's a remolding of things going on. There's a lot of kind of actions being taken, things being said, events taking place. You know, is it really, is there this link between Fadak? People do say, well, if he had given back Fadak, then, you know, he would have also been admitting, well, actually, yes, you know, Imam Ali should have come directly after the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him and his family. But are they linked, or is there something else behind Fadak? Is it part of a kind of a wider overall policy, or is there this direct link between the two?
There is definitely a link, as the brother pointed out. This is Ibn Abi al-Hadid, who is not from the school of Ahl al-Bayt. His book is Sharh Nahj al-Balagha, so volume 1, page 198 is the reference the brother referred to. And he points out that the issue of Fadak is linked directly to the issue of Khilafah.
Right.
In, first of all, as I mentioned earlier, strategically asserting the Khilafah of Abu Bakr, to deny anybody else, to do what he wills, what he wishes, and not to be denied by anybody. And also in terms of weakening the claim, the supporters of sources of income, reasons to be afraid of Amir al-Mu'minin Ali ibn Abi Talib and his Khilafah. So there is definitely a linkage between the two, by affecting the status of Fatima, by showing that he can stand against Fatima, and he can go against what the Prophet left. If he can deny Fatima, he can deny Ali ibn Abi Talib.
Right.
If he can say, the daughter of the Prophet had something, I took it away from her. Or I took it away from Ali ibn Abi Talib. Or I did not give to Fatima, I won't give to Ali ibn Abi Talib. So in both, it is definitely a linkage between the two. The brother also on the call referred to the fact that the Prophet might not have left instructions for Fadak regarding Fatima Zahra. That's actually not true, because the Prophet did leave behind. He instructed Amir al-Mu'minin to write down that this land of Fadak is for Fatima Zahra, and Fatima takes this deed, if you want to call it, to the first Khalifa. The references are Bihar al-Anwar, volume 21, page 23, Nawa'ib al-Duhur, volume 3, page 148, Awalim al-Ulum, volume 11, page 574, Majma' al-Nurayn, page 137, and she gives to the first and second Khalifa a deed that says this was land gifted to Fatima Zahra, and it is said that the second Khalifa tore it up and said that there is no value in this, and that they won't agree to this. And this is when the first Khalifa then says, evidence against this deed is that I heard the Prophet saying, we don't leave behind inheritance. And then Fatima Zahra begins her stage of argumenting before the speech. She brings in evidence. She's forced to bring witnesses, which we'll detail shortly after the break, inshallah.
Thank you. Yeah, and just further to the point where I said earlier about how Abu Bakr had actually been present when the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him and his family, had handed over Fadak. The question that he asked her was, well, were there any eyewitnesses? So although he himself had been there, he's then later on saying, were there any eyewitnesses to this event? But we're going to go to break, so inshallah we'll see you again in a few minutes. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Ahl Bayt Live Fatimiyya special, where we're looking at the issue of Fadak and Lady Fatima, Salam Alayha, a piece of history which is not often narrated when we are looking at Islamic history, something that does tend to get left to the side. So this is why we are focusing on it tonight, because this was a key event that took place after the death of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him and his family, and this was really one of the kind of signs of the way that things were going to proceed in the years to come. And just before we start, we do have a caller again on the line, so we will take this call. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. I just called a couple of minutes ago regarding the issue of Fadak.
Yeah.
And I think the brother misunderstood the point. When I said that the Prophet did not leave any instructions, I did not mean that he had not actually, left Bibi Fatima with any, What I meant to say was that if Bibi Fatima was not meant to inherit Fadak, as Abu Bakr saying, then the Prophet certainly would have told Bibi Fatima, would have told his daughter, look daughter, after me, this Fadak belongs to the people and it is not yours. So that is what I actually meant, instructions. Yeah. And correct me if I am wrong, as far as I understand, Fadak was gifted to the Prophet, and the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, gifted it to Fatima during his lifetime. Yeah. So Fadak actually became under the ownership of Bibi Fatima during the Prophet's lifetime.
That's right.
So it was hers, and there was nothing there to inherit. So Abu Bakr's stance is knocked out in the first round because there was nothing there to inherit. It was already Bibi Fatima. It was given to her during the Prophet's lifetime. Yep. So that is what actually I meant. That, Na'udzubillah min zalik, Bibi Fatima was not ignorant. Yeah. And if there had been any instructions regarding that it belonged to the Ummah, then Bibi Fatima would have known and the Prophet would have left instructions. Okay. In the absence of such instructions, for Abu Bakr to say that it belonged to the Ummah is totally false. That is all what I meant to say.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I did think you were speaking rhetorically, actually. So, meaning you were making a point. You were trying to make a point in what you were saying. That yes, if there, it seems a bit strange that as you said as well,
was left for the Ummah.
Yeah, that she hadn't heard of this narration as well. So we're looking at the events of once the land had been taken from her, and so she. Well, you said first of all that Imam Ali alayhi salam came out to speak before she did.
Yes, I mean, if I want to just give the viewers a brief overview of what had occurred. So when the land of Fadak was seized and Fatima's representative removed from his position, she she questioned the Khalifa first of all, and he had affirmed yes that it was his intention to seize Fadak and give it to the Muslims or keep it in the treasury, the public treasury for the Muslims. So then she brought forward the deed that I say the Prophet had Am-o-Abiha right to declare that Fadak was the land for Fatima Zahra sallallahu alayha. And this was ignored by the first Khalifa. So he replies that this is of no value. Yeah. And why this is of no value? Because I have heard the hadith from the Prophet saying that we do not leave behind inheritance. So after this, Fatima Zahra then begins a second round of debate with the first and second Khalifa. She enters their majlis where they were sitting with their companions, and she and this is on the order of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And then she brings some of her female companions and family members with her, and she says, what evidence do you have for seizing Fadak? And he says, well, it's not inheritance. And she says, Fatima says, well, this is actually the first false witness because we've never heard that hadith before. So she actually says that hadith is not true. Right. And then he says, well, what is your evidence? She says, the fact is that I used to use it in the lifetime of the Prophet. And in Islam, we have something called Sharia. We have something called milk al-yamin, which means, so if you use a car on a daily basis, we see you using a car. I can't come and challenge you and say, can you prove that this is your car? Because you've been using it freely up until now. For me to challenge you, I have to bring witnesses saying that this is not your car. And so Fatima says to the first Khalifa, then you have to bring witnesses saying that I did not use it, and it does not belong to me. I don't need to prove anything. You've just kicked out my representative. Yeah. So clearly I've been using it up until now. So you have to prove that it does not belong to me. And again, she's refused. They refuse to listen to that piece of advice and wisdom, and they say that it's going to be used for the Muslims, basically. And so Fatima Zahra then says, what about the verse that says that I am purified from sin? Why would I claim something that is not mine? What do you have to say to that? And what about the verse in the Quran that refers to giving us our due, and the verse that says khums is for us as well? And to both of these, the first and second Khalifa respond by saying, well, bring witnesses. We're not going to accept these evidences from the Quran or the fact that you used to use it. Bring witnesses for us. So now a second stage. The first was the hadith. The second was refusing and saying, bring witnesses. So now Fatima Zahra brings witnesses. Amir al-Mu'mineen and al-Hasan and Imam al-Husayn salamullah alayhim, and Am-o-Abiha, who is the wife of the Prophet, and Asma bint Umays. Now why these people? Because these were the people in the house of the Prophet at the time. So Amir al-Mu'mineen wrote the deed. al-Hasan and al-Husayn were with her during that time, and they were old enough to recall and to remember what had happened. Am-o-Abiha, who was the wife of the Prophet, also in the house at the time, and Asma, who was the friend of Fatima, her companion, and she helped serve her as well. So when these were brought forward, the second Khalifa says, well, Ali is her husband, so he's partial to her. Al-Hasan and al-Husayn are her sons, so they're partial to her. And Am-o-Abiha is also very close to her, we don't accept. And Asma, she was the wife of Ja'far, so again, she's from the same family. We're not going to accept any of these. So the issue of witnesses is then turned down. And Amir al-Mu'mineen replies to them and says, well, whoever says Fatima is lying, Fatima and al-Hasan and al-Husayn, is surely in the wrong position, because Fatima and Ali and al-Hasan and al-Husayn were used by Allah in the event of Mubahala. The Prophet used them for truth. And now you're saying these people are all lying? So even though we're partial to Fatima, we're her family members, you're accusing us of lying by saying that we're giving false witness. Sayyid Shabab Ahl al-Jannah, al-Hasan and al-Husayn. So you're saying the leaders of the youth of paradise, you're saying Fatima, who's part of the Prophet, you're saying Ali ibn Abi Talib, who defended the Prophet, Harun and Musa, all of this, you're saying they're lying. And he's saying this is a warning to them that you're accusing the wrong people of lying. And Fatima then turns away from this majlis and says, well, I want Allah to be a witness that these two, the first and second Khalifa, have oppressed me. She turns then to a group of Muslims, and she references volume 29 of Bihar, page 191. And she says, oh Muslims, can you see what is being happening? My testimony, our status is being turned down in this way. Things are being changed, and you approve, you're silent, you won't stand up and fight what is going on. And then Fatima again goes to Abu Bakr, and she convinces him, and this is a majlis in a private gathering. The references are again Bahar, volume 129, page 157, and so on. There's more references. And then Abu Bakr is convinced at this stage. She manages to convince him that actually he can't do this. And he wants to return the deeds of Fadak to Fatima Zahra, and the second Khalifa prevents him from doing so. He says, because by doing this, you're going to put her in a position to challenge us, as the callers mentioned, Ibn Abi al-Hadid saying that then she will challenge us for something else later on. And then Amir al-Mu'mineen enters the masjid. So Bihar volume 29, page 189, summarizes this event. That Amir al-Mu'mineen then saw upon himself to argue with the first Khalifa. He enters the mosque of the Prophet, where the first Khalifa was with his companions, and he questions him. He says, why have you taken away this land of hers? And the first Khalifa says that this now belongs to the Muslims. So you must bring witnesses if you wish to take it back. And Amir al-Mu'mineen says, well, Fatima was using this. You have to bring witnesses, not her. And then he says to the first Khalifa, what do you say about Ayat al-Tathir, the verse of Tathir? إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيُذْهِبَ عَنْكُمُ الرِّجْسَ أَهْلَ الْبَيْتِ. And the first Khalifa says, obviously it's a verse in the Quran, we believe in it. He says, what if someone accuses Fatima of stealing? What would you do? He said, then I will punish Fatima, of course. Imam al-Mu'mineen says to the first Khalifa, then you would become a kafir. And the Khalifa is astounded, why would I become kafir? He says, because Allah has purified Fatima in the Quran. You testify to this, that she's free from sin, she's free from error. And yet someone accuses her of a sin and you accept their word for it, you're going against what the Quran is telling you to. And at this point, the group of people in the mosque, they start to hum and murmur. And Amir al-Mu'mineen leaves feeling that despite people knowing the truth, they're not willing to fight and take a stand for it. And when he returns home to Fatima Zahra, he informs her that essentially he's done all that he can, apart from physically coming out and fighting for Fadak, which we explained before why he wouldn't do that. And so Fatima is left in a position where now she has to make a statement for history. She has to clarify to everybody, the first Khalifa, the second Khalifa, the Muslims gathered there, people who had just become Muslims, the hypocrite, everybody. And for us, that this is what is happening, this is the situation, this is what the solution is, you're not going to do it, this is the result of you not doing it. and I've said my bit, I've made it clear what's going on, and it's recorded for history. And when she leaves to the mosque of the Prophet to give her khutbah, which we'll cover in the next episode, it is at the instruction of Amir al-Mu'mineen. He says, go to the mosque, go and speak to your father, the Prophet, go and inform people what is going on.
Right.
So it's a statement of the Ahl Bayt for all of history that this is exactly what occurred.
Thank you. It's also recorded in Bukhari as well, this dialogue where Fatima salam alayha says, "Oh Abu Bakr, if your father dies, who will be his heir?" Abu Bakr says, I who am his son.
Exactly.
Lady Fatima salam alayha says, "Who is the heir of my father?" Abu Bakr says, "You, his daughter." She says, "If I am his heir, then why have you seized Fadak?" Abu Bakr says, "I heard the apostle of God, peace be upon him and his family, saying, we are the group of prophets, and we do not have any heirs to inherit our property. Whatever property we have belongs to the Ummah when we die." Fatima says, "But my father bestowed Fadak upon me as a gift during his lifetime, and it has been in my possession all these years." Abu Bakr says, "Do you have witnesses?" Fatima salam alayha says, "Ali and Ayman are my witnesses." Abu Bakr says, "The testimony of one man and one woman is not enough. Therefore, there must be either two men or one man and two women. But since it is not so, the case is dismissed." And that is in Sahih Bukhari. So it is actually recorded where
She brings
she
forward
says
the
again,
witnesses. Yes.
yeah, and she says again, it was given as a gift to me, during my lifetime. There's also another slightly disturbing narration from another Sunni reference, Majma al-Zawaid, volume 9, where it says that it is narrated by Umar. It says, "When the Messenger of Allah died, I came along with Abu Bakr to Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam and said, 'What do you have to say about what has been left by the Messenger of Allah?' Imam Ali replied, 'We have the most rights with the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him and his family.' And Umar said, 'Even those properties of Khaybar?' And Imam Ali said, 'Yes, even those of Khaybar.' And Umar said, 'Even those of Fadak?' And Imam Ali said, 'Yes, even those of Fadak.' Then Umar said, 'By Allah, we say no, even if you cut our necks with saws.'" So there was, again, we had a caller on Saturday who was quite upset by the idea that there had been disagreements between the companions, we could say, at this point in history. But we can see, even when we're looking at the narrations from the books of the other madhahib, that there is clearly disagreement. And again, especially with regard to Fadak, we can see that written down in the history books.
Yeah, like you say, the sources show that there was a disagreement, but the sources also show that the truth was evident to all.
Yeah.
So there might have been a public debate and disagreement, but actually the truth was quite known to all. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, so he's one of the famous scholars from the non-school of Ahlul Bayt, so the other schools, well-known hadith scholar and alim of Islamic sciences generally. His book is called As-Sawa'iq al-Muhriqa. If we refer to page 25, he says that the second Khalifa says to a group of his companions, "I'm going to tell you something about this," and he's referring to the issue of Fadak. Allah had given this land of Fadak to the Prophet without giving it to anyone else, and this was at the instruction of the Quran, which we mentioned, Surah al-Hashr.
Right.
And this was purely to the Prophet. This belonged purely to the Prophet. So the narration here from the second Khalifa is that he knew this was not an inheritance. He knew that this was something that belonged to the Prophet, and the Prophet then gave to Fatima Zahra, and that it wasn't something that belonged to the Muslims, as they claimed, because it was something in the possession of the Prophet. When the issue of the first Khalifa saying that I heard a narration saying that this is inheritance was challenged, then the first and second Khalifa said, both of them said, actually forget that narration. It belongs to the Muslim. Fadak belongs to the Muslims. You have to prove that it was belonging to you. But the second Khalifa here actually admits to the fact that they knew it belonged to the Prophet and it wasn't something in the hands of the Muslims.
Right. Thank you for that clarification. So obviously after the Lady Fatima salam alayha had brought these witnesses to the court,
Yes.
when it wasn't even actually necessary to bring them. After that, as the narrations in all the collections say, she died angry. So there was this period of anger, and it is said that at one point the Khulafa, well, the first Caliph and Umar, came to her house to apologize, but she turned her face away.
Yes.
Again. So again, why did they? You know, some people might say, well, look, you know, they realized that they realized that they had done wrong, and they wanted to make amends, and perhaps, you know, someone might argue she was in the wrong for not accepting their apology, and what a shame, you know, they died. So she died upset with them. What was this reason that they came?
When we discuss in the next episode, inshallah, the khutbah of Fatima Zahra, the speech, and then we discuss, inshallah, also the details regarding the attack on Fatima Zahra's house, we realize that it left a very sour taste in the mouth amongst the Muslims, that only within a few days after the death of the Prophet, these events were taking place. And the fact is, more than one person began to speak out in Medina and say, this has gone too far. The daughter of the Prophet is angry with these two men. We remember the hadith of the Prophet saying that whoever Fatima is angry with, I am angry with, and Allah is angry with. Surely us as people as well, if we allow this to continue, Allah is going to be angry with us as well. We're all taking part in this sin. So the first and second Khalifa noticed the discontent, and we'll cover this inshallah when we talk about the death of Fatima Zahra in the last two episodes. They wanted to make amends and at least see to it that Fatima's death wouldn't be at their displeasure as well. They would not have been a cause in her death, and she would not die with displeasure in her heart against them, because then the Muslims would feel that Fatima has led them to a place where they would be damned by the Prophet. Her dying angry with them means the Prophet will be angry with them. And then they would blame the first and second Khalifa for that situation. So it could have been a difficult situation for them if they allow this to continue. So they attempted to speak with Fatima. They attempted to, and we'll discuss the references and narrations, to seek some sort of forgiveness from her, and she refused. And we mentioned the hadith last time about the Prophet saying that Allah is angry with whoever Fatima is angry with, and the other narration is that Fatima is a part of me. Whoever hurts her hurts me, and whoever loves her loves me. And this is Sawa'iq al-Muhraq again, page 289. Al-Imam-o-Siyasa 31, page 31, Kanz al-Ummal, Sahih Muslim, in the chapter on the commendation of the companions. We have the hadith that says, Fatima Sayyidat Nisa al-Alimin. Fatima is the mistress of all the women in the world, from beginning to end. And there is a huge amount of references for this. I'll mention what I can. Al-Mustadrak al-Sahihayn, which we mentioned was for Al-Hakim Nishapuri, page 3, volume 3, page 170. Sharh Najib al-Agha for Ibn Hadid, volume 9, page 193. I can go into detail regarding the others, Sahih Bukhari, for example, Tirmidhi, for example, Hilyat al-Awliya, Musnad Ahmad, Kanz al-Ummal, Al-Isti'ab, Ustul Ghaba. But, it suffices to say that Fatima's statue was so great that you did not want to offend her, and that you should have always tried to please her and respect her to respect the Prophet and gain her happiness so that you'd gain the Prophet's happiness. So in any circumstance, if we take out all the legal arguments that are being made here, we take those all away, and we say in any instance, if Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet, who's somebody clearly of high stature, as we see in the Quran and the Hadith, she comes and wants something, asks for something, you should go out of your way to please Fatima Zahra. Her pleasure is the pleasure of the Prophet and the pleasure of Allah. Her anger is the anger of the Prophet and the anger of Allah. To totally refuse her and to deal with her in such a saddening way, and also a way that you would not have dealt with her if the Prophet was alive, shows that there is an agenda behind it. And unfortunately, readers or viewers today who say, well, those times we should just gloss over. We can say, well, actually, we need to learn the lessons, because the Muslim Ummah suffered from those days.
Yeah.
And it is suffering till now. And the Muslims at the time, had they stood up to injustice, we would have been in a better position today.
I mean, it could even be argued that it's a bit of an injustice to say, well, let's gloss over it and not look at it, because it's like supposing your family member was hurt by somebody, and you say, well, let's not talk about it. You know, let's just gloss over it and look on the bright side. You know, you're not actually defending that family member. And as we know, with the issue of walaya, the relationship of love and obedience between the follower and the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family, part of that is loyalty to the Ahlul Bayt, alayhim salam. So you can't really sort of say that you're loyal, but then just say, well, we're not bothered about that now. And
the tabarri, dissociating from their enemies. That is the second part. So loving those whom Allah loves, which is the prophets, which is the Ahlul Bayt, and the people that surround them and doing good, and dissociating from their enemies. So I can't just love Fatima Zahra and that's it. And that's what she says in her khutbah. She says, well, look, knowing us, the Ahlul Bayt, isn't enough. You need to act upon this.
Yeah.
And disassociating from the enemy, standing up to injustice, is the second part. I can't love Fatima. I can't love Imam al-Husayn and be okay with his killer.
Yeah.
I can't love Imam al-Husayn and not stand against his killer and oppressor. It doesn't work like that. You have to love Imam al-Husayn, and you have to dissociate from his enemy, from his killer, from his murderer. You have to hate those people for the sake of Allah, because those people murdered Imam al-Husayn. Likewise, in the issue of Fatima Zahra, she is mistress of all the women of the world. So it's not one individual. She's someone who represents all the women in this world. She's the best female that has ever been created. And if I know that something was done to her that shouldn't have been done, I need to make that quite clear, that I'm not happy with this action. Otherwise, on the Day of Judgment, I'm counted amongst the people who are fine with that.
Yeah.
Because Allah's Prophet, in one of his narrations, says that Allah will gather a group of people with the people that did an action if they were happy with that action.
Right.
And this is what we have in Ziyat al-Arba'in, for example. When Jabir comes to do the ziyarah, he says that Allah on the Day of Judgment will bring me with you, the people who sacrificed on this day. And his companion La'mash says, well, how? We didn't fight, we didn't ride a horse into battle. How are we with Imam Hussein? He says, because Allah's Prophet has said in his narrations that if you love a group of people for their actions, Allah will make you a part of them, whether it's good or bad.
Yeah.
So if you love what they did, good or bad, Allah on the Day of Judgment counts you amongst them.
Right, right.
So on this day, we need to say, well, I'm either with Fatima Zahra or I'm with the rest. And according to the evidence that we have, the status of Ahlul Bayt, I think all of us should be on the side of Ahlul Bayt and disassociating.
Especially as the Holy Prophet commanded that.
Ahsantum.
As well. Well, we have to wrap up here, and inshallah, in the next program, we will be looking at her speech. Inshallah, going into that in detail, and after that, inshallah, if you could just again clarify for our viewers.
Yes, so next episode we'll look at the speech of Fatima Zahra. Thereafter, the episode will look at the effects of the speech of Fatima Zahra. Then we'll have 2 episodes discussing in detail, inshallah, if time allows us, the evidence regarding the death of Fatima Zahra, the attack on the Fatima Zahra's house, and the death of Fatima Zahra.
That's great. Thank you very much. And thank you for your calls. Inshallah, we'll see you in the next program. Assalamu alaikum.